And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to, and of course, I have the wrong screen on. There we go. That's better. Hi, everyone. Welcome to on Dotnet Live. My name is Cecil Phillip. And, welcome to our show where we talk about all the wonderful things happening in the world of .NET and within the .NET community. Today, my friend Ed here is going to join us, and he's going to be talking to us about how we could build components with Blazor. So I think that's really cool. I hope you love that. Ed, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly to folks so they know who you are?
Sure.
And what do you do?
So I am a principal developer advocate for Progress Software. You might better know us as the brand Telerik and all of the Telerik UI components that we've built for pretty much every .NET platform that has ever existed, I think.
Nice.
So I've been a writer and a speaker and developer for about 20 years now. So Blazor is my latest thing that I am just absolutely loving. So I'm happy to share a lot of Blazor knowledge with you all today.
That's amazing. It sounds like you probably have tons of stories over like your 20 years in the industry of how things have changed and tools we used to use and all that type of stuff.
Lots of scary things too. So there's
Nice.
lots of scary apps that I've seen people write and I've had to go fix. So
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. We got to talk about that a little bit later. But before we move on, I definitely want to give a shout out to everyone that is in our live audience watching us right now. I'm looking in the chat and I see we have some folks from Brazil, from Italy, India's here. If I scroll up a little bit, yeah, we have folks who are joining us from all over the place. So definitely thank you all so much. Really appreciate y'all being here.
wow, it's like 2 a.m. I think in India. That's impressive.
It probably is. That's dedication. That's what I call it. That is definitely dedication. I also know that this month is Pride Month. So definitely shout out to all our folks celebrating Pride Month. It is also Caribbean American Heritage Month as well. So for all of our Caribbean folks that are here celebrating with us, definitely appreciate you joining us. And I hope you enjoy the month. There I see Ricardo in here from Jamaica. See some folks here from Montana. Oh, wow. We got some people from Barbados too. That's awesome. Germany, North Carolina. Who else we got in here? The Dominican Republic. We got a lot of Caribbean people in here today. I love it. I love it.
Very nice.
Okay. So before we move on, why don't we dive into some links, right? Before we start talking about Blazor components, and let's kind of see what's been going on in the world of .NET. Now I'm going to share my screen super quick. Dum dum dum. And let's take a look at some of these links here. All right. So first link I want to share with everyone. So Dev Intersections is actually happening this week, or it might have been done by now, to be honest with you. And our fearless leader, Scott Hunter, just gave a keynote where he talked about modern application development with .NET and Azure. So the video for this is already available. If you head over to channel9.msdn.com, you can check it out right now. And you can learn about some of the new and really cool things that we're doing with .NET and .NET 6 and Xamarin and Maui and like all this other cool stuff.
Maui has me so excited.
Yeah, I Maui's gonna be
Thrilled to get
awesome.
on that.
I was telling James the other day, like I haven't done any mobile development in years. Um, but like Maui might be the thing that gets me back into like writing mobile apps again. Like that should be super cool.
We've
Particularly
got
too now that
Blazor
you can plug
Hybrid.
Blazor in it.
Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at, getting my Blazor apps on your mobile phone.
Right? Right. Can you just take my code and make it a mobile app? That would be amazing. Thank you so much. Speaking about Blazor, this month we're also having a Blazor Let's Learn .NET event, and that's going to be on June 25th. So our Let's Learn .NET events are all free and they're live streamed, and they're usually with folks going through different learn modules or workshops and learning paths, and you can follow along and kind of learn how to do whatever it is that they're talking about. So in the past, we've had folks talk about Web API, we've had accessibility, we've had folks talk about C Sharp. Now, this month on the 25th, we'll be talking about Blazor. So, if you're new to Blazor, you want to learn about it, you want to check it out, definitely make sure you RSVP for that. And now I'm going to dive into some of Ed's links. This week, actually, I think tomorrow is the last day, but if you're watching us live, definitely make sure you check out Blazing into the Summer 2.0 with Telerik. And I think, Ed, you've just been kind of like killing it all week, like interviewing tons of folks. Like,
Yeah.
you had Dan
Thanks.
Roth and Layla Porter. You had the B unit guy on that did some unit testing. I
Yep.
wanted to see this
Yep.
one, but I gotta check out the recording, I guess.
Yeah. Eagle Hansen is fantastic, man. He's a Microsoft MVP, and it's one of those that's like really well deserved because he has
Yeah,
burned so many hours on B Unit making that thing perfect for the .NET community. It's amazing.
right. That's amazing. Yeah, definitely got to make sure I check out that one. And then building efficient apps with Blazor. Oh, look, who's this guy? I think this is what we're doing right now, right? Like we're gonna be talking about building Blazor components today on .NET Live,
Yeah, it
and
fit perfect into our Blazor week.
right, and then tomorrow you're gonna end it off with improving user workflows with Blazor components. So
Yeah,
sounds
Fierce
like you
Kittens
guys have
is
a full
joining
week,
us. She is a YouTuber, or sorry, a Twitch personality that is just wonderful to
yeah,
watch. So many different things she's talented with. So
right.
like every time you tune into her channel, there's something either artsy, crafty, code, you name it. She's got it going on, man.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've seen some of her streams before, man, and she definitely has a really entertaining stream for sure. So if folks haven't seen her, definitely recommend you guys go ahead and check it out. Now I'm going to share these links in the chat, um, but while I do that, I'm going to take my screen off, and I'm going to put your screen on because, as I always like to say, this is not the Celsius show. This is Ed show. So, Ed, why don't you tell us like how do we even get started building components with Blazor? Like this we use Blazor, we create web things with them, but like how can I start creating these components that I can
Yeah.
reuse and share with different folks?
So I'm going to try to do this absolutely from scratch. And the only thing I've got here is I've created a new project and I've added a couple simple services that create some random data that we can pull into our application a little bit later. But for all
Hmm.
intents and purposes, this is file new project in a Blazor app.
Okay.
And if I go ahead and run this out, it might be something that you've seen before. I've left the homepage blank because this is where we're going to do our work today, but we have the obligatory counter component example and the
Yeah.
fetch data example. We might come back and tweak some of these when we're done. But what I'm going to show today is kind of the beauty of what is the component model for Blazor. So the Razor component syntax is just so simple and easy to get started. The main things to remember here is that Blazor is a SPA framework that uses web standards. So your HTML and your CSS that you already know and love should be able to work perfectly in your Blazor app. And it looks like folks are asking if I can zoom. I can bump up the font here just a little bit more. This might be a little bit better. And then on this side, I can zoom over here when I'm getting ready to show off our project. This is a WebAssembly application, so Blazor WebAssembly app. There's nothing really special about it other than the fact that I just added some simple services in here, again, to generate some data on the fly for us when we need to bind to some data. So let's just get some really simple things started here. And let's create an alert component. So we'll do a div tag. We'll add a class here. And I'm going to use a little bit of Bootstrap to get started, but we're going to write our own CSS in just a minute. We'll say alert, and then alert dash danger. And this is like your typical Bootstrap alert dialog type of thing. So we'll throw a span inside of it and say hello from Blazor in here. And then this is not a component so much as it is just some HTML, but what I'll show you is how we can take this HTML and evolve it into a component. So let's try to run that again. And you see we've got a little pink box here that says hello from Blazor. And what I'd like to do is actually make this into a reusable component. So that's what we're going to focus on next. So if I take this HTML out of here and I create, let's go ahead and just add into our pages folder. We'll move this to another place in just a minute, but I just want to show how easy this is. So I did add a new item. We're going to select Razor component. That is what Blazor's made up of, is Razor components. And we'll call this alert box.razor. And then we'll just paste that same HTML code into our project here, our alertbox.razor file. And then we'll go back to our index page, and you'll see that I have an alert box component now. And that's the most basic component you can probably create. And you can see that I had to refresh there to get that to work. What we're going to do next is I'm on .NET 6, so I'm going to start using live reload or hot reload. So while we're building these components today, you'll see them just reload immediately in the browser here. So that should be really nice too. So that's just how simple it is to create a component. We're going to go over the different aspects of a component as well. Let's take a look at some that I already have in here. I have some pages. And in Blazor, a page and a component are essentially the same thing. The only difference between a page and a component is a page is a component with routing. So if I go over to my counter component, you can see that this counter component has a page directive at the top. And there's three basic sections of a component in Blazor. There is your directives that are usually found at the top. Those are compiler directives that give the component special abilities like routing, for a good example right here. You put using statements in here, do dependency injection, things like that. The other section you'll find is markup. So this is HTML and Razor markup. So it's pretty much anything that works, or anything really that works in HTML you can use in your Blazor or Razor component. And then we have some Razor syntax here that binds to either some data or events. So you can see we have an on-click event that's bound. We're also binding to some data here, so the current count. So when we click on the button in the component, it will increment the count of the current count value and then display it back up here on the page. So this is our interactive increment count component that you saw me do earlier. So if I go back here and route over to counter and click on this, you'll see it count up. That's the component that we're on right here. So this system that we have to put components together is very flexible, very easy. You saw just how simple it was to create that that
Yep.
alert box, but it's not a very flexible alert box right now. So it's kind of static. It has the same text in it. If we create multiple of these, for example, and we save that, you'll see that I have 4 of those alert boxes there. They all say
Yep.
hello from Blazor. So that's not super helpful for us. What we'd rather be able to do is come into our alert box and put some kind of custom content right here and make a nice container that we can just call alert box and then put that content inside, and it should error out. You'll see I have an exception here because that's not valid yet. So what I'm going to do is go back to my alert box, and in here I'm going to create a code block. So this is the other section of a component that you'll see. You have your directives, markup, and your code, and I'm going to create a parameter here. And a parameter is basically a property. Think of a property on a class. All Razor components get compiled into a class, but think of a property on a class. It's public, and it has a getter and a setter. So what we're going to add here is a special class called a render fragment. And a render fragment tells Blazor that the property that we have here, the parameter, is going to accept other Razor markup components in HTML. So render fragment is part of our rendering tree in Blazor. And we're going to call this one child content. And then again, we have to have a getter and a setter, so we'll just add that property there. And there we go. We do have an ending curly brace. Just want to make sure I got that right. And then we need to tell the template where we want to render that child content. So I'm going to wipe out that middle section here and put in child content in its place. So now I can go back to my index, and this custom comment section here will work. And it looks like my console is alerting me that it's reloaded. So right now when I'm creating or when I'm writing code, it's refreshing the entire application. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn on hot reload, which is a new feature in .NET 6. And this will actually, you'll stop seeing this pop up all the time to let me know it's reloaded. So let's go ahead and make a couple of these now. And you can see in here that these are all independent instances of that alert box. So that's going to reload now. And oh, what do we have here? Let's try rebuild. All right. So let's try this one more time. Looks like it got hung in a little bit of limbo there. All right. So you can see these are 3 different instances of that alert box component now. They're allowing child content, which is really cool. So this child content property is something that is implicit in Blazor. So what it's actually doing here is it's creating a HTML tag here of child content. But we don't explicitly need to write this out because it's something that is understood by Blazor. So this actually has the same meaning as if we were to omit the child content region there.
Oh, got it.
So the reason that we have that is if we wanted to add multiple of these. I can't have multiple named child content, but I could have something like header template and footer template and so on. So what I might do is name these outright. So I have a header content and a footer template. And because there's so many of these, Blazor doesn't know how to implicitly take the content that I've added as a child here and stick it in one of those templates. Now we need to explicitly write out which template we want that to belong to.
Got it.
So I might say this is my content template. There we go. IntelliSense is a little behind. This is a preview Visual Studio, so that we might see some ghosts in the machine today. And then we have a header template. And then we'd put our header here, and so on. So again, the IntelliSense might be just a little bit behind. And then we also need to tell it here where to render these at. So I'd put my header template maybe at the top, and you could have HTML surrounding these as well. So I could have an HTML header block there, and render my content beneath it. So my content template goes there, and so on. So now we have these
a couple
named
questions coming in. I want to make sure we kind of jump in and see what folks are asking really quick. So a couple of questions coming in from YouTube. And Sergio was asking, what's the best way to change an HTML element class on runtime? Would it be like creating a private property or something of that sort?
So we're actually going to do that in just a moment. So if we could just hold that one for the next section here, we're going to create, we're going to add a property here so we can change our alert box to a couple different colors. So we'll get that one in a couple seconds.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask one more before we keep going. Harvey, also on YouTube, is asking, is it more natural to use a parameter? And I'm guessing he's talking about when you created the component and you had those render fragments. So instead of using like a property on the element, he's asking, is that more natural? I'm guessing that's what the question is, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by that one. The parameter, we do have parameters here. So each one of these is a public parameter on the component. So parameter is basically a property that just has this special attribute to let Blazor know that that is a parameter property. So I'm a little confused by the question. I think we need more context on that one.
Yeah. And let's see what else we got. We got one more from YouTube. It says, I saw you pass into the child component only text. Is Blazor capable of rendering markup passed from parent to child?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really excellent question. So first of all, let me take these extra bits out here because these will actually cause a runtime error now. Because again, I said that Blazor doesn't know which template this belongs to as a piece of child content, so it won't know where to render those. So let's take those out. We'll leave the footer blank. And then not sure why our IntelliSense is having a hard time catching up here, but everything looks like it should be. And then let's go into custom content and let's just throw, remember we have that counter component and it has, even though it has a route, it is still a component and we can use that component in our template region here.
So just really quickly, so the folks in the chat are saying you spelt header template wrong.
Ah, okay. Let's see.
Which is probably why. Well, not there, but in
template, and then I'll copy.
It's palette.
That. There we go.
There we go.
There we are. So let's try to rerun that. That's probably why this is hung. So we'll go back here and do a rerun, and then you should be able to see that. Yeah, there we are. There's our header goes up here. Our counter component is rendered beneath the header, and then we don't have a footer, so nothing's rendered below that. And we could still count with our counter component. So this render fragment will accept any HTML, any razor, or any component, or any combination of. All right, so how are we doing on questions? We get a lot of questions. I love this this group.
Yeah, we got a lot of folks asking tons of questions inside here right now. The latest one is there a way to bind Blazor components parameter at application level?
Yes. So what you do is create like a service or a POCO object, a plain old class object, and then just maintain state across your application using dependency injection. And we'll kind of get to that in just a few minutes. When we start doing, we'll do an alert box, but we'll iterate over a collection. And I think that might make things more apparent when we do that.
Got it. And let's grab one more before I let you keep going. This one also coming in from YouTube. We got a lot of questions from YouTube today. What is the recommended way to use script tags that are required to be inserted inside the HTML?
Don't.
Don't do it.
So yeah, don't do it. So Blazor, one of the wonderful things about Blazor is, for the most part, you do not need JavaScript for anything. Now, this is a SPA application. So if you were to stick a script tag in your index here, for example, say script in this area, the application is rendered before it's client-side rendering. So this script is not going to run in the same context that it would in a normal HTML application, just the HTML page. So it's not going to execute if you just try to stick it in there. What you need to do is look into JavaScript interop. And you could still make calls out to scripts in Blazor into JavaScript. And that's actually done quite often for things that aren't supported by Blazor, like geolocation or Canvas APIs, things like that. You can totally call out to JavaScript and do those things, but you can't just drop script tags randomly in your application. There's several ways to load JavaScript into your app. One of those is directly into the index page. And then if it's a JavaScript module, so if it's been built using the ES6 module pattern, which is standard now in the browser, you can actually lazy load your JavaScript into the application, into the component as you need it, and make calls to that JavaScript from C#. So it's something that's totally doable.
Nice. Okay. Let's see, what else do we got? Some questions coming in from Twitch. This one from Frostadev. It's asking, can you add an interrupt layer and make that it links between a Razor component and a JS file? I think you kind of just answered
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. You could do
So the
that.
answer is yeah.
If you want to see a really complex but useful solution to that, I have a GitHub repo, and it's also a NuGet package called Blazor Size. And what Blazor Size is, this is a JavaScript interop package that you use for detecting the device size. And this will actually make those calls out to JavaScript for you and do screen size detection.
Nice.
And then you can flip different parts of your UI around to accommodate the different screen sizes. So for example, on this one, what we're going to do is set up a media query, which, let's see, where's that media query at? There's a media query component in here. It's hard to not be in Visual Studio to see this stuff. But basically, the media query component will let me know. Oh, I have the wrong example. That's why. Let's go down or up a bit. We could do it without a template. Here we are. So here, it's a great example. So I have a media query component. We set the breakpoint for a small or medium size window, and when the application senses that breakpoint has changed, it's going to trigger an event. So we can toggle a Boolean value and say, if this is a small screen, display a weather forecast in card view. If it is a large screen, we'll go ahead and do a full weather data grid and display that out. So you can actually do that. Underneath the hood of this, there is calls out to JavaScript to do that detection to see what device size you're at. So for the most part, .NET devs shouldn't have to write much JavaScript because there's these great little libraries out here, or things like the Telerik UI libraries, which we can talk about in a bit as well.
Yeah, I'm following in the chat. Like, there's tons of questions coming in.
So many questions.
Someone is asking, what is your theme? Like, what theme are you using on Visual Studio?
Oh, on Visual Studio, this is actually a custom theme I put on the Visual Studio Marketplace. So let me grab that for you really quick. This one is called Mid-Century. And I'll get the link for you. I'm going to pop this into private chat so you can paste it for everybody on all the streams. But you can find the Visual Studio theme there. So this is something that I created. I really enjoyed it, so I shared it with the community. So we can get back on track a little bit, and I think it'll answer more questions that people have. I'm going to take these special templates out for just a minute and go back to using child content. Because we're
like you were saying
just
before,
kind of simplify a little bit.
Content, we'll just do it by default. So
yes,
you won't have to do it.
Right. So this is implicit now, so we don't have to have all that code. And it's going to make things just a little bit easier for demo purposes. So we can do that. And we'll just put some static text there. Let's answer another question we had about CSS, but first, let's move this out to a component project. So let's do that, and then we can turn on the hot reload stuff, and it'll make this go a lot smoother. So I'm going to come up to my solution level here. This is my Blazor project. I'm going to go up to the solution and say add new project. And then I'm going to create a Razor class library. I'll zoom in so everybody can see that really good. So a Razor class library. This is going to give me a place to stash all of my components. And if I have other projects that I want to use it on, I can share this with other projects within my organization or put it on GitHub, etc. So I'll just call this my components. You can name that better for your purposes. I'm on .NET 6 Preview, and I just want to note here, if you're in Blazor, you don't want to check this box. This is for MVC and Razor pages. So don't check that box if you're doing Blazor. And then we're going to hit create. And this is going to stub out a Razor component library for us. It's got some sample stuff in here. This is the equivalent to class1.cs. So we're going to go ahead and just delete those out. We could put static assets and things in here as well. You can see there's a background PNG and some JavaScript that you might want to add to your project. We're not going to get into JavaScript interop because it's like a whole probably 2 or 3 hour show to get that discussion going. So we'll delete that one too. And you'll notice we have an imports.razor file. And this is kind of some public imports that we have. So Razor has this concept of global using statements, which is now something that's common in C# 10. But Blazor has had this all along. So we can use imports.razor to import using statements across all of our components here. So we'll leave that alone. And what I'm going to do is take my alert box from this pages folder, and I'm going to copy this and paste it down here and remove that one from our pages. So now I have a assembly here, a component library that I can bring into my project and keep everything nice and separated. So I need to come over to dependencies and just add a reference to my components, hit OK, and then import these into my imports file. So I'll do using my components. And now that I have this using statement here, let me close this index page out and reopen it. It should cross your fingers, re-highlight. There we go.
Nice.
So now I've moved that component out to its own component library, so we can work on this some more. Let's add some CSS styling to this. So I'm going to right click on my components, the root, and do add again. And I'm going to do new item. And another feature of Blazor is CSS isolation. So what we can do is actually add CSS per component. And if we were to remove this component from our project, the CSS would go away with it. So it's a pretty neat feature. And it's something that things like React and Angular have. So the convention for this is to say alert box.razor.css. So this is the same name as our component with CSS at the end. as a suffix. And notice how it just nested that file right underneath of the component. So now this is the markup and the code, and this is the CSS to make it pretty. And then we just need to add our CSS here. Now, this is actually going to be pretty simple, and it with Blazor's CSS isolation, our custom CSS that I just added to this file, which I think I'm missing part of. So let's try to fix this up and say alert. This will actually take precedence over the bootstrap that you saw, but it's missing a little bit here. I had a little copy paste error. There we go. I see it now. So you don't have to watch me type all this out and misspell things again. We'll just paste this in. So we'll just drop a little padding in here, some border radius, a little bit of outline, and then we have some different coloring here for danger, info, and error. And the question we had earlier is how do we add the ability to style these components with different CSS classes? I'm going to show you a couple different ways. And let's render this all out again. And to do that, I'm going to go up to my main project here and just open a terminal. So PowerShell's up here, and I'm going to do .NET Watch and let that run. And I'll zoom in here when it gets going to show you the text that's coming up. Oh, and namespace could not be found. So I'm going to try to clean the solution here and rebuild it, because it looks like it was having a hard time finding this component directory. And now it looks like it's running. So it says it started. And up at the top here, you'll see it says watch, hot reload enabled. So this is .NET 6. This is a feature of .NET 6 only. So if you're on .NET 5, you're not going to get this yet. But what we have is hot reload. And I need the right page open for this to work. Let me try loading this up in my browser again. I may have inadvertently closed it. There we go. So there is our component with the custom styling on it that we just created. And it's not conflicting with the Bootstrap styles because Blazor does something called CSS isolation. Yeah. And what it's doing is it's taking our markup and it's appending like a GUID type of an ID on top of it, or an attribute rather. And then it's modifying the CSS as well. So if we look at this, the actual compiled HTML and CSS is going to be slightly different. And you'll see this B dash, and then there's like a code in here. And if we look at the style for that, let's see if I can get Chrome browser to behave here. You can see that it's appended that attribute here at the end of our CSS. So now it is scoped to that component, and it won't conflict with the Bootstrap CSS that we already have in the project. So it's keeping those two things separate. And all that magic that just you saw from the compiler comes from the fact that we just named this with this convention. So it has the same name as the component.razor.css. Pretty neat. So I dropped these side by side so we can play around with hot reload for a minute, because I think this is a really great feature. For example, let's just change this. We're doing alert.danger or alert-danger. Let's just make this blue for a moment just to show when I save this. And it's going to tease me here. It's not gonna do the thing that's magically supposed to happen. Let's try this one more time.
But I mean, that's what happens when you use preview bits sometimes, right? Sometimes things
absolutely. Did I get the right alert? Should be alert danger. And yeah, so it's not playing along for some reason. This was working earlier. We won't troubleshoot this too much. There it goes. So it cached something, which it doesn't normally do with hot reload. So you'll see this updating as we go. Like for example, if I put 2 here, hit save, You can see the console going down there, and it's reloaded over here. So we've
Now
got our hot reload.
we got a couple questions about SAS. If you could dive into those super quick. So
Yep.
one person here from YouTube is saying, I heard mixed talks on CSS isolation. I'd like to use SAS. Is it recommended to use CSS isolation instead of
So
SAS? Why?
my preference is actually to use SAS instead of CSS isolation. So I'm showing this as a very common thing that people ask about for Blazor. So I like to just show off the capabilities here, whether I totally agree with that pattern or not. But I love SAS. I think SAS offers a little bit more in terms of variables and nesting and reusable code. It's got a little bit more bang for your buck. People seem to like the CSS isolation too, for reasons that it doesn't conflict with other CSS classes that are in the system. Some people like to have strict control over the styles, so developers can't go in there and muck things up with important bang, and then you've got this soup of CSS. But you can also enforce that type of stuff with just good SAS best practices. So they both work. They both have, it's matter of taste type of thing. But I personally prefer SAS over this. I've got a blog post that I can share as well. Actually, if you just go to my website, it's one of the first two blog posts that's on there. Actually, it's the latest blog post that's on there, and I'll share that with you, Cecil, so you can post that in chat as well. But that is an excellent question. I actually do prefer SAS myself.
Got it. And then another question we have in here. This one's coming from Andreas. What's the difference to have a style inside of a Blazor file versus CSS isolation?
Okay, great question. Because one thing that you really don't want to do is throw a style tag up here. Because if I put a style tag in this element here, what's happening is every time I render an alert box now, I'm kind of spamming those tags into my browser. So you'll see this reload, and if I inspect this, we'll go right into one of these components and try to get this. It's hard to do on these cramped screens here. It's one of the cruxes of streaming. You can see the style tag is repeated multiple times from that. So style sheets inside the component, not so much of a good idea. They actually get rendered out every single time that component is used. So it's not really going to cause too many problems, but you're just adding additional stuff into the DOM that just doesn't need to be there. All right, so we've got...
Let's see what else we got. We got another one. I'm trying to find it, but we did have another one I wanted to ask. This one. This is the one I wanted to pop up here. So the question is, how can I set the CSS version of isolated styles to force the browser to reload to the latest version? So you can imagine, let's say there's a new version of it, right? Like, how do I know, get the browser to dump that old one and pull in this new one?
It should reload the style sheet. There's no mechanism of cache busting that I know of. You might have to just force reload the cache in your browser, but generally it notices that there's a file size difference, and the browser will load a new copy of it. Right. So I haven't really run into an issue with that. That hot reload one, I think, was just because hot reload is being a beta of hot reload. So before we run out of too much time, we still haven't answered the question here of how do we change up these different styles, because we have actually I need to go back and change that blue color off of that one, but we have, let's see, I don't have a clipboard anymore. Let's just make this a nice orange color. Just pick one of these, and there it goes. Hot reload worked that time. Yay. So that loaded back in a nice bright neon orange for everybody. what we want to do is give the user the ability to change this style out if they want. And one way to do that is, again, with another parameter. So we can come in here, and to make this go quicker, I can actually paste this off my clipboard. And we'll pop a parameter in here of alert danger. And let's zoom that back out. So we have a new parameter. And I'm going to call this one CSS class. And it's set by default to alert danger. So it's never an empty string here. So it always has something in it unless we specify a different style. And it's reloaded, but there's no changes really to see there. But what we can do now is, let's go to the middle one here and just say CSS class equals alert-info and save that one. And then when we go back, you could see that we have different styling now on each of those. So I could say CSS class alert-warning, I think is the other one that we have. And there is maybe not a warning. What was the other one that we had here? We've got three styles that will overwrite the bootstrappy ones: error, info, and danger. So if we go back and make this error, then we have our three. There we go. There's three colored ones there. So now we have control over the CSS class. There is yet another way to do this. And this is something that I find really interesting. So this is called attribute splatting. And what attribute splatting means in Blazor is we have a property named CSS class here. Mm-hmm. If I were to add something else here, it's going to throw an error when this runs. You can see an error has occurred. If I go to inspect here and look at my console, the actual error says that there is no property matching the type foo. And this goes for any HTML attribute as well. So if I were to just say class, like CSS class, I'm going to get that same error. And it's same for like ID and those type of things. So you can see that it doesn't have an attribute of class or a property that matches class. Because if we look at our code here, we have these two properties only. But there's a feature in Blazor that lets us actually accept these unknown attributes as input. So let's take, I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit here again with some copy paste magic. And let's hope the Razor compiler here will accept this change. I think hot reload is not liking that straight copy and paste here of the entire content. Let's try to rebuild that. Oh, it still doesn't like it. Where's my build errors? Okay, I see what it is. Yep. So I'm missing my @code block here. There we go. That should make it happy. So now I can come back and restart my watch. And CSS class does not exist in the current context. Actually, we want to take this off for the moment. So we shouldn't actually need that right now. And there we go. And we're loading, but something's not quite right yet. So what this is doing is we're accepting a collection of attributes. And these aren't hard tied to parameters that are listed in here. So we could actually go back here and just say class now with a normal HTML attribute. And we won't get that error anymore. And what it will do is Blazor will pass along that CSS class and write it in line where this attributes directive was placed. So it will say div, and then anything I put into the tag here, which it keeps kindly adding extra quotes that I didn't ask for. Now let's take some of these off because it's mucking things up having multiple of these. So we could say even ID is foo and that type of thing, and it's going to pass these along happily to the the section that I marked attributes. So they will render where this tag or this directive is found in the markup. So if I go back here, you can see the rendering is a div of class alert info with an ID of foo, but we're still missing a little piece of the CSS class in here. So I've kind of defaulted it to alert danger, but I also want to append that default. So it should be like alert dash danger, but that doesn't quite work either, because if I specify something like alert info, it's not concatenating this alert info with the alert and alert danger. What we want to do is just replace this one piece of string here and not this one. So it can get a little bit tricky as to how I want to merge the additional attributes with something I already have. So I have a NuGet package up for this. This is something that I wrote called Blazor Component Utilities. And I'll share this with you again so you can post this in chat as well. It's just a handy little NuGet package that I wrote. It's a nice pattern. It's not like a framework or anything like that. It's more of a pattern than it is even a library. So this is a fun one that I like. It makes this process a whole lot easier, and it also helps you with conditional CSS values as well.
Nice.
So what we'll do is I'm going to take and copy paste again over this this component, because you don't have to see me type all of this out. And it's saying that it doesn't have the NuGet package. So let's just make sure that it got added here. Packages, yeah. So it didn't get added for some reason. Let's go to Manage NuGet Packages real quick and make sure that Blazor Component Utilities is installed. And that should get rid of that error. It's a really nice Fluent API. If you're familiar with Fluent APIs from like HTML helpers or just like your basic .NET build pipelines and middleware and stuff like that, it's very similar to that. And hopefully this clears up. Let's try reloading the... oh, I put it in the wrong assembly. That's what it is. We need to add it here. I put it in the main project. We need it in our component project. My apologies. I put it in the wrong place. So this actually goes where our components live. And we moved the place where our components live, remember?
Yeah, those were in that Razor class library, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in our Razor class library, now we should have a reference to it. There it goes. It was starting to clear it up when I closed it. All right. So I'm using my Blazor component utilities, and I have my attributes here, and then after it, oh, why can do this again? Is not found.
You need a rebuild, maybe.
Dependencies, packages. Yeah, it didn't add it.
No,
I had this problem earlier where Visual Studio was saying it was added, but it didn't actually put it. It says it's added here. I've got a green check mark. But if you look at Solution Explorer, that is not there. Let's try a clean and a rebuild.
What did it say?
Right, you know what? Let's try killing the live reload. The hot reload.
Yeah, that's a good point. That could be what it is.
Maybe it's holding it up there. Let's try a... No, I don't want to update. Let's try Blazor Component Utilities again. This time we'll uninstall. It says it's installed, but the compiler's not finding it, which is fun. So we'll try this one more time.
Okay.
And I think it did it that time. I think it did it. Build succeeded, so that's fine. That should go away. All right.
Nice. So there we go.
Visual Studio just having a little, keeping us on our toes.
Making sure we're paying attention.
So we're still going to accept any HTML attributes here. And then we also have a class attribute that we're going to append to. And then I've also added disabled in here just to show that we can do other attributes as well. And then we're still using this additional attributes code. And I don't think I quite explained this exactly either. So this parameter has a special flag on it that says capture unmatched values is true. That is that error that I was talking about, that if it's not catching the unmatched values, it just simply throws an exception. So this setting this to true tells it that if it sees a parameter that doesn't match one of the explicit parameters in the component, it's going to go ahead and shove those into this object dictionary. So we have our additional attributes. And then with my library, with these additional attributes, what we can say is, by default, our CSS is going to contain the text alert. And then we're going to add a class of alert dash dark, which is one of the values I used to have in this demo. Or sorry, that's when it's disabled. So if it's disabled, then it's going to be alert dash dark. And then it's going to go ahead and merge any class attributes from the additional attributes dictionary. And then it will build the CSS class for this component. So it's doing many things here now. So it's taking our custom input. It's also overriding if this is disabled or not. So now I can just say with regular CSS, give me an alert-info. We'll just do Control F5 for now to make sure this comes up correctly. There we go. So it's an info. And if I were to change this to error, we should be able to come back, and that is red. So you can see it's merging those CSS classes together properly now. And then if we do disabled equals true, this is an actual property, and it will accept that. And okay, it's disabled is not working for some reason. We'll move on though. We could attack that and get that to work, but there's a little bug in my code probably somewhere. So I want to get to one more thing before we wrap up, and that's how to do collections of things, because I think that's very interesting to how these components work. So right now we have an alert box, and if we wanted to make a collection of these, we'd have to kind of make multiple, or we could use like a for each statement, which IntelliSense doesn't want to help me with today, but we could iterate over a list here. So for items and items, if we had some sort of collection here, we could just iterate over it like this and put in, say, an item here and render out the item inside of the alert box. But this still isn't quite what I want. What I want is a component that I can just give a data set to and have it know what to do with it. So let's bring in some data. So let's inject here through dependency injection a service. And I have a logger. Let's see, where's my logger service? I might need a using statement here. At using services, there we go. And now we should be able to use inject. And then I want to bring a service in, and it is the logger service, and we'll just we'll call it logger. And with logger, we get log items, which is a collection of items that we've logged through our logging service. So what we'd have to do to kind of write this out is say for each, and then we'd write these out individually, and we say var log in logger items. And look at that, I managed to do it by hand. Log dot, and we have three properties here. We have an ID, a level, and a message. And let's just throw these maybe in like an unordered list or an ordered list, something like that. So we can move this code block around. Boy, Visual Studio is having a lot of fun with this today. This is bleeding edge beta bits here. So we'll throw a list item there and put our log message inside. We can kind of see what data we have. And then we'll build a component that can accept data and write that data out in that component template. So here's all of our items. It's just some lorem ipsum. So if it kind of looks like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, it really doesn't. But just so you know, there's some data there, right? So what we can do is similar to this for each loop. Let's go back over to our components. And in our components library, let's add a new component. So we'll do add new item. And we want, let's try that again, add, we want a razor component. I don't know where my template went, razor. There we go, razor component, and we'll call this one alert list. So we want like a data bound component that we can bind a list of items to. And again, to save for time, I'm going to copy and paste. And this is one of the cool things about Blazor is these generic typed items or generic typed components. So we have something called a type parameter of t_item. And this is basically like saying I have the name of the component here is alert list. You could see up here. So this is similar to saying, wait, I picked a bad spot to type. Alert list of t_item. Okay, so we're going to feed this alert list a collection of t_item, so it can iterate over it and write out multiple alert boxes for us. And then the user, since this is a templated control, the user can control what goes inside of that alert box through their own template. So we have a couple special things here. You're going to see something a little bit familiar called render fragment, but this time it's typed. So it's a render fragment of t_item because we're going to supply a type to the render fragment so it can iterate through the template and apply that item to it. And then we're going to have a collection. We have an iRead-only list. This could be IEnumerable and list as well. This just keeps things simple. We'll do a read-only list, and we're also going to use t_item there. And this is our items. And this could be called anything, really. This could be called data. You name it. Naming is hard, of course, but this is your collection that you're binding to. So now if I go back over to my Razor index page, what I should be able to do is say alert list, and then I can say items equals logger dot items. And this is an intelligent template that I can use to render an alert list. So what we want to do inside of this alert list is give it the template. So the way templates work in Blazor is we want to tell it what kind of template we're going to iterate over. So we'll say template, and then we are going to have what is called the context. Is this going to work with me today? It is not. So we should have inside of our template a context item. Let me make sure I've got the code correct that I'm trying to type out here. But this is going to let me, let's see here, item template. That's probably why. Item template. There we go. Looks like it's picking it up there at context. So what context is whatever type of item we've bound is going to be that item. So for this, we're binding to log items. So we have context, and then that context is our log item. So it has ID, level, and message. And this context can be a little bit inconvenient because we don't really know the type unless we're really paying close attention to what's being bound here. So what we can do is say context equals, and then name this. So now it's log, and then we can say log.message. And if we go back to our application, you can see that the log messages are written out into our alert boxes. So now we have this nice template driven, data-driven component because we're using t-item, and that t-item is calling a for each loop and passing in the for each item here. It's going to say take the item template. Again, the item template is this, which could have things like HTML in it. So I could put a h1 tag in here and say at log.id. I could write out the ID to it. And then it's going to take that, whatever that item is, whether it is HTML, another component, or Razor markup, and it's going to apply the item that we're iterating upon to it. It's going to pass it into this template. So we have log ID and log message. And if we look at our component, there's our IDs, writing in that H1, and then this is coming up in the other part of the tag. I bet we're getting a ton of questions, and we're running way over time, aren't we? Oh, you're muted.
There you go. So yeah, we do have a ton of questions, but let's try and see if we can get into some of these. Now, a lot of folks are asking the code that you've just written. Are you going to make it public so folks can look at it? That's one of the questions people are asking.
Yeah, I've actually got this on a GitHub repo already.
Okay.
So barring some minor changes, just because things are .NET 6 on here, I think it's called Blazor Day Demo. Yeah, there we go. I'll paste this in so you can share it with chat.
Sure.
So this source code is up and online already, so you can dig through that.
And then folks are asking, or a lot of folks have been talking about the differences between using the inline code tag and then also using component base. A lot of folks saying like they have preferences of using the code the component base because it's a little bit cleaner and those types of things. And I mean, I think it's all preference really at the end of the day, right?
So we're talking about like code behind files and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think I saw another question. Somebody said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a button to make code behind files? This is Visual Studio Preview. I don't remember. It's the latest. Yeah. Check this out. See this code block here? Watch what happens when I right click. Quick actions and refactorings. This is all brand new that just came with this release. I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. What does that say?
No way. Are you serious? I did not know that was in there.
Yeah. So somebody showed me this yesterday. A guy that runs with our Twitch stream named Mr. Blazor Mr. Magoo showed me this. He's like, they added this feature. Check this out. So if I click on this, look at that. It just took everything and put it in a code behind file for me. Right. So if we look at our Solution Explorer, there should be, where did it? Okay, so it's alert box. I need to expand that. Nope. Where did it put it? It should be nested under here. Oh, here it is. Okay, it is there. I'm overlooking it. So there's the top level. There's the alertbox.razor. This is the file it created, and there is the CSS file. So we're nice and tightly nested with our three items there. And now we have a separation of the markup. Wasn't that one? It was the alert box. So there's the markup now. It's just 3 lines of code. And there is all of the component code. And it even took the namespaces and added them as well, which I think it added too many. So we can just do a little refactor there. And it namespaced it and partial classed it. So that's how you do the code behind, is you say public partial class with the name of your component. Because essentially the Razor file that you create gets compiled into a class. So this is just appending some more behavior to that class. So it's using a partial here to add that capability. So now we have that code behind, and it was done in one little click of our mouse in preview only. in preview
That's
only.
amazing.
So that was one of the reasons I wanted to show preview today. Even though it's given us a little bit of headaches here and there, it's got some really cool features.
Yeah, and people seem to be really loving that feature inside of the chat. One person from Twitch is asking, is there the reverse of that? So can I go back from the code behind to the code in file approach?
I don't think so. I don't think you can undo that, which they might need to add. Let's see. Let's see what happens if quick refactorings doesn't do anything here yet. They might want to add a little warning dialogue or something because there's no way to undo what I just did that I'm aware of,
Right.
except for a good git, you know, git control commit history. Just pull that back out of your git,
Yeah.
restore the file to normal. Yeah, it is there now, and that is some pretty cool stuff.
Nice. And we're going to take this last question before we take off. Coming back again from YouTube, Journey's asking, using C Sharp, I've been adding all of my using statements, my at using statements to the underscore imports Razor file. Should I be adding them to specific Razor pages instead?
So the question is about the imports. So imports, there's nothing bad about adding it here. If you're only going to use it in one component, you might as well just add it to that one component. So I tend to add something here if I've done it more than one time. So if I've added that using statement at least more than once, I might go ahead and just throw it into imports. And those global using statements are coming to C# 10 as well. So we're going to have to ask this question about everything pretty soon.
That's true. I've been meaning to try out how those two work together. Like, so if I have an imports, a Razor imports file, and I also have like my global usings, like, can I just use one versus the other, or do I have to use them both? Like, it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they would only apply. So imports.razor doesn't apply to. You'll see when I refactored that that code behind blockout, which I think I messed up. I think I pasted over. I was going to show one last thing, but we're running out of time. I goofed this up, but what you would have saw is there was a bunch of using statements up at the top because your .cs files do not behave. They don't look at this imports.razor file, so you have to add those
Yeah.
using statements directly to the .cs file if it's a code behind. So I think they only work in their own context anyway, so I don't think we'll have any conflicts there.
Got it. And then Alan in YouTube has been asking this question for a little while. I think he really wants us to answer it. Can you use interfaces for the add type param components?
Yes, so you could have you combine any type there pretty much within reason. So you could have an interface of like I used a logger for example. You could have an ilog, as long as whatever your data set is you're applying to it complies with that ilog. I guess you could essentially do that. At some point you have to have a concrete type to data bind to, but
Yeah.
you know, I think you can do what's being asked.
Sure. Cool. So Ed, now before we take off, why don't you tell us a little bit about like some of the other stuff you guys are doing at Telerik? I know there's another live stream event for Blazor happening tomorrow, and obviously you guys have controls and all this cool types of stuff too for Blazor.
Yeah, I just wanted to show real quick. We have Telerik UI for Blazor has grown to like 70 plus components. Actually 75 and up now, and we have like some really great stuff in here, and there's some real in-depth demos. So if you don't want to build all of this component architecture yourself, you want to just focus on your business problems, I was just demos.telerik.com is a great place to go look at our Telerik UI for Blazor stuff, and we have some really cool examples out there like this one. I'll share this with you so you can pop it in chat if anybody wants to take a look. This is actually up on GitHub. So if you go to the demo, there's a GitHub link actually live in the demo. But this is like a line of business style application. It has the the ability to like manage the products and view sales reports. And all of this was written without a single line of JavaScript. So you can do things like paging, custom sorting and date range pickers and all of that type of thing. It's all 100% accessible. So it conforms to accessibility standards. So it has like keyboard navigation. Screen readers are able to read these out loud to users with visual needs. It has full templating. Those templates that I showed you, that type param template, I mean, this is being used for things like our data grid, where we can just pop any sort of other component. Like you can see a rating component being embedded in the chart here, or the grid. You can embed images, anything that you want, other components. I could throw a counter in there like that example earlier, and those things will render out in our data grid components. This is, it's easily themed. So we have light and dark themes for the application as well. So our components all support theming through Sass. Again, I'm a big fan of Sass, and our components support that. We can even auto-detect the user's operating system theme and apply that to the application as well. So all that you can find under the GitHub project. And I mean, we can even like drag and drop these menu elements around. There's all sorts of great components out there in the Telerik UI for Blazor library that you can tinker with and not have to write all of that stuff from scratch yourself.
Got it. Nice. Like, it's always useful to have a set of components and controls. You know, I could never imagine, and I have friends that have done this, but I can't imagine writing my own grid component and having all those scenarios like you mentioned, like sorting and paging and filtering and, you know, like rendering custom row elements and all that types of stuff. I'm like, nah, I got other stuff to do, man.
Yeah, and you know, I was a big fan of Blazor very early on. Steve Sanderson demoed this at the MVP event like probably 3.5 years ago. And I immediately went to the engineering team. It was like, we got to build like components for this. It's going to be huge. But if we do, we're not going to like take our existing JavaScript stuff and pretend that it's Blazor components. We need to like really write this from the ground up again. So it supports all of the things that Blazor has that's really good, like templating, for example. So you'll find that our components are actually native Blazor components, meaning they don't have a bunch of underlying JavaScript. There are some JavaScript interop, like I'm not going to pretend there's absolutely none in there, just because Blazor doesn't support literally every scenario the web can do. So there are a few things, for example, like our sales report page, where we have a little bit of JavaScript that helps render the charts. But other than that, everything else is written natively in Blazor, so you get the full like capabilities of what Blazor offers. And I think that's something you'll find that's very unique to Telerik.
Nice, nice. And so if folks want to check that out, I went ahead and I put the link inside of the chat so they could head over to the Blazor coffee demo if folks want to check it out. And add to, like, if folks want to reach out to you, they could find you on Twitter. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier, you have your own streaming channel as well. I think a few folks in the chat mentioned they're now following you on Twitch. So definitely go for some new folks
Excellent.
tune into your stream now.
And I saw somebody asking about file uploads. There is a built-in file upload now in .NET 5, but with Telerik UI for Blazor, we actually have one there as well, which I don't know if I can show this here, but yeah, I don't have the right file type. So this one is only allowing docs and PDF, but it has like nice animations that play while it's uploading. You can do multiple files and then like add and remove them, and all sorts of really cool stuff that goes a little bit beyond what the basic Blazor file upload does. And it supports, you know, it's receiving that file on the server and all of that very easily. Well documented as well. We have really great documentation. So if you're looking at file uploads, check that out. We also have document processing capabilities on this. So say you upload in this application, if you were to upload a docs file, the server would grab it and turn it into a PDF on the fly, which is something that's really nice, and that's part of the library as well.
Hey Ed, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about building Blazor components. And for folks that are still here, thank you so much. We definitely did go over a little bit, but you're still here, so I really appreciate it. Um,
Yep.
Definitely come back next week. We're gonna have some more folks talking about Blazor and ASP.NET Core and tons of awesome stuff here on .NET Live TV. So I hope you enjoy your day. Definitely check us out again in the next couple of weeks and enjoy writing some cool stuff with Blazor.
Very cool. Thanks for having me, and goodbye, everyone. We'll see you on Twitch.
Bye, everyone.